You're listening to the Footy First podcast on TSN 1050. Champions live here.
Oh, yes. That's right, folks. It is time for Footy First here on TSN 1050. Nick McVicar hanging in. And boy, do we have a show for you today, because it is finally back. CPL action happening this week. I cannot tell you how excited I am for this. This is one of my favorite times of the year. And we got a packed show. Not only will we have our predictions, which, by the way, 11 games this week for Canadian teams. We also have the commissioner of the CPL joining us in just a little bit. But why don't we start? What better way to start the CPL season than talking with the head coach of your reigning champions, Forge FC. Bobby Smyrniontis joins us now. Bobby, how's it going?
Everything is good.
That's what I love to hear.
Excited as you are to get started.
That's what I love to hear. I want to just start here. You have obviously had tons of success in the CPL, 3-time champion in 4 years already. What's kind of your mindset going into this season with the club?
Yeah, I think when you set a standard within an organization, both on and off the field, you want to find those incremental gains each year. So the standard is high with us. We're obviously a club that's competing for championships on a yearly basis, and now we need to find that extra level of motivation to keep it going.
Is there any difference heading into this preseason? Have you had any changes, or are you trying to keep the same mindset and try to keep that foundation that Forge has built over the first 4 seasons of the league?
Yeah, I think every year, if you look at this team, we evolve. I think we look at little things tactically on how we can get better, both with the personnel that we have and just also within ourselves as a coaching staff. Different ideas, different things that we can do. Last year was obviously a very successful season, and I think right now it's not about reinventing the wheel in this off-season and if we look at the preseason, but it's about being a more efficient team, more consistent team, and getting those 10% increases in certain parts of the field that we want with the group.
You mentioned the personnel that you have, and obviously one of the big off-season moves that you made was actually just bringing back David Choinière and replacing a key player in Crutzen. How has the team kind of come together, and how important was it to make those 2 moves?
Yeah, it was important for us. Last year we had quite a bit of a turnover, the biggest turnover we've had with Forge in the 2022 season. And this year it was about maintaining balance. When you look at a player like David Choinière, he's at a perfect age, to be a pillar of this club going forward. And we know that players have ambitions and different things of moving on. But if a player like him is staying in this league, we want to make sure that he's playing for Forge FC. I think he's had a successful 4 years, and he's important to us going forward. And then on the flip side, we lose a very good player, one of our leaders in Daniel Crutzen, who last year played 4 matches for us in what was a very successful season. We're able to bring in another very good central defender in McVicar James, and it gives us an ability to go after our goals. And when we look at that, it's to make sure that this club in 2024 is playing Champions League football.
Well, that's just where I was going to go next. In conversation with head coach of Forge FC, Bobby Smyrniotis. And Bobby, you mentioned the Champions League. How important would it be for you guys to have success in the Champions League? And going into year 5, how important is it for you guys to get back there next year as well?
Yeah, I think one of the driving factors of this team, and you look at the players when they've come in from day one as champions from 2022, this is the first year that Forge won't be playing in any continental competition. That's been something that's been massive to our club. That's 18 games in the CONCACAF region over those 4 seasons between CONCACAF League and Champions League. Players in this club know the prestige of being part of those competitions, and I think that's the driving force to make sure that the club's back there in 2024.
You guys have had so much success in the first 4 years, obviously finishing first or second every single season in the regular season. How important is it to get off to a hot start, to try to level the field right out of the gate to get your guys going?
If I've learned something over these first 4 years, it's that the first 2 weeks will not settle what's going to happen in the end. Maybe that trend changes, but I think it's about consistency. That's the most important thing. If you can find that consistency early on, that's great. But you've got to find that consistency throughout the season, and we've seen each and every year that moves a little bit differently. Small little fact is Forge has never won an opening game in 4 years. It hasn't deterred us from being successful later on. Of course, you want to come out of the gate. You want to be doing everything well. But it's a 28-game season, and we know that one of our ways to Champions League is to finish top of the league. We've done that before in our past, and it's about finding that consistency.
And the consistency is well documented. One thing that may have changed a little bit this year was your preseason, where you guys ended up making the trip down to Costa Rica. What did you kind of learn from this squad down there, and what are you bringing in from that time down in Costa Rica into the season?
Yeah, I think we looked at that component of the preseason in a variety of ways. One was, I think it's always important to be in the CONCACAF region, just kind of away from North America per se. With not playing in any continental competition, thought it was good to go down there and get some very good competition with teams like Saprissa, Cartagenes, the under-20 Costa Rican national team. We had 4 games down there training at Alajuelense's facilities. And increasing our ties in the region was also something very important. As we want to grow this league, we want to grow our presence in the region to hopefully attract some of the better players from the Central American region into our club. And we've had that with guys like Joshua Navarro, Omar Brownie. And then from the team component, I thought it was excellent. We wanted to make sure we're getting very competitive games against teams that are in mid-season form. And I think that gave us an excellent challenge to prepare us to kick off today.
It's going to be a fun kickoff in conversation with the head coach of Forge FC, Bobby Smyrniotis. And Bobby, you already mentioned James as one of the players that you brought in, but you brought in 2 others, one from Sigma and another one from the CF Montreal U23s in Kadeem Kane. What are these 3 players going to bring into the squad? And by the way, the Sigma player, Malcolm Duncan, obviously. What are these guys going to bring into the squad this year that you're really excited about?
I think when you look at all of them, they're very different in where they are. With McVicar James, we're obviously getting a top central defender, a player who's got a lot of European experience, going back to a good 10 years. I think is when he left me over in Mississauga from Sigma FC to head over to Hungary. It's great to have him back, and it's just having a great leader and competitor on the field, and that's what he's shown coming into preseason. He's as hungry as ever to get himself enjoying his football, and we enjoy having him here. Then you look at a player like Malcolm Duncan. He's a player that's been training with our first team for the past couple of seasons as he was finishing his playing days at Providence and playing with Sigma in League One. A player I know very well, very versatile defender who's been excellent and actually made a few appearances with us last season. And then Kadeem is a talented young gentleman, a player we scouted, we watched quite a bit, brought him into preseason, and as a 17-year-old, I think if he does things right, he's got a very high ceiling, and I always love working with some young players who have a promising future.
You talk about your work with Sigma and the growth and the pathway that has kind of been formed with that club as well as Forge. How important is it for the clubs across the CPL to put those grassroots down? I know Forge this week announced 8 different youth club partnerships. How important is it to help grow this game across the country by doing that?
Well, I think it's massive. I think the one thing we haven't had in Canada and going into youth development, which I was involved in from 2005, is we really never had the top and the pinnacle of the game. Now we've got more professional clubs, and I think it's a duty of the professional clubs to provide the guidance underneath so that we excel what's happening in the youth development side of things. Obviously, Sigma has been a very important component to what we're doing at Forge, and going back to 2019, it's something that we wanted to make sure we've got an excellent blueprint in the Hamilton community. Obviously, launching a team, being a competitive team was our first goal. Go through a pandemic. Now we're at a stage where we've got a great partnership with our development club, Hamilton United, as well, and then the 8 partner clubs in the region. And I think this is us providing expertise where we can, and just making sure we enhance the game and really work on the model of developing players in the Hamilton region as well.
In conversation with Forge FC head coach Bobby Smyrniotis, and Bobby, we've seen a lot of movement amongst the other clubs in the CPL, and they're taking shape and getting ready for this season as well. What has impressed you the most, or which club has impressed you the most with their off-season additions?
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think there's 2 teams that have kept more than 50% of the roster, and a lot of them, we got Vancouver, who's a brand new team, but a lot of them have changed close to 50% of their teams. And teams have gone a little bit different than they have in the past. You look at a team like York United, who's traditionally looked at younger players and so on, and now they've become a more veteran team in the league with a lot of players who have had success playing in different clubs in the league. So I think that's going to make things very interesting, in these first few weeks. A lot of coaches and maybe players not knowing what to expect from the opponents, and I think that's great for the neutral fan and for the supporters of the clubs. But I think all across there's been some good moves amongst the clubs. Some very good players have left the league, but the one thing we've learned in this league is every year there's a handful to more players that we didn't know about the year before that end up becoming stars in this league, and that's what I'm looking forward to seeing.
It's so true. There always is that guy who surprises every single season. Quickly, I want to talk about your brother making a transition from Forge into the head offices of the league. How excited are you for him for the new opportunity, and what does it mean to have someone who came through the Forge system now being part of the league?
Yeah, I mean, he's a massive component to what we were doing here at Forge and how we built this team together. And I think it's important as this game grows. The one thing we're going to see in all levels of the game is different people, different Canadians, coaches, players moving into different roles within this league, and that's what we're creating here. We're creating a massive infrastructure of football. He's a great mind who's been involved in youth football, managing players, running a club. So I think he's a great addition to the league to bring his expertise across the table. Hopefully, he doesn't give all of our opponents too many of our secrets.
That's hopefully for you guys, yeah. Last one before I let you go here. Obviously, big matchup to start the season. The quote-unquote biggest rivalry in the league now between you and Cavs, how it always ends up being you guys near the end. What do you make of this game, and what are you expecting from your squad?
Yeah, I think when you look at it, and just at its simplest level, you have 2 coaches who are still standing from year one here in the 5th year. I think it's 2 clubs that love to compete and hate losing, and I think that's what brings out the best in these games and makes them very entertaining over the years. And I expect something similar today. They're a team with quite a few changes in the depth of their group as well. But I think it's always an entertaining match, and it's always a good one to start the season off with.
Can't argue with that at all. I'm super excited to get this season started. Bobby, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me, and keep up the great work.
Really appreciate that. Thank you, and good luck today. We're going to take a break here. On the other side, as I mentioned, CPL Commissioner Mark Noonan will be joining us. You are listening to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Welcome back to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Nick McVicar hanging in here ahead of the opening weekend of CPL, and what better way to kick off opening weekend than to talk with the commissioner of the CPL, Mark Noonan. Mark, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I can think of a lot better ways, like going to the matches and enjoying the great product we're going to put on the field.
Well, yes, but that's part of it. But ahead of the weekend, I'm getting ahead of the games. I'm excited because this is one of my favorite times of the year where we get to start seeing some of the top Canadian talent playing. And you've been in your position now for roughly 7 months. We talked to you back when you kicked it all off. And what have you seen in that time frame that has impressed you the most about this league?
Now, where do you start? I think probably the thing that impressed me the most is the quality of the product. I mean, if you go back to the playoffs we had last year, the quality of the product on the field has been really been above my expectations. My expectations were pretty high too, and then also the authenticity of supporters groups. If you saw the supporters groups at the final, that was it felt like a real football match, and it's just something that's going to build from here. So we've got a really solid base, and we got to continue doing everything better together, and there's nothing that's going to stop this league.
Heading into the 5th season of the league, what are your thoughts? What are kind of thoughts going around the front offices heading into the season?
Well, the thoughts are we need to support our teams to the greatest extent possible. We need to keep building our fan base and converting people who love the game into fans of the CPL and its teams. We need to continue doing the things that make leagues successful and sustainable, whether that's adding corporate partners, whether that's working on our media distribution, whether that's working on expansion and infrastructure and ownership, and all of those sort of things that you need to build a long-term sustainable league. That gets us out of bed and keeps us busy all day. And the really hardworking people at the league office and the team staffs, you can feel how excited everybody is about the start of this season.
You talk about expansion and the growth of the game. Obviously, we have a new club this season in Vancouver FC. How has that club kind of shaped in the time since they've been announced, and how have you seen that kind of growth out in the Vancouver region?
Well, what I'm excited about that, not only does it create a new derby for us between Vancouver and Pacific, but
a very exciting derby too.
Yeah, but you're talking about two decorated Canadian internationals in Josh Simpson and Rob Friend. Easy for me to say, but decorated Canadian internationals who are giving back to the game, and they're putting their hard-earned money from when they were playing days and afterwards into the sport in Canada and into the Canadian Premier League. And Rob and his partners are building a purpose-built stadium at Langley Events Center. I'll be out there for the opening match on May 7th. So they're building a cathedral to the game in the Lower Mainland there. They're going to have a great rivalry, but it's a message to people that care about Canadian soccer, that you've guys like Rob and Josh who are putting back into the game, and I don't think that story's been told enough. And hopefully we'll have more guys like them putting back to the Canadian game that they got so much out of.
In conversation with the Commissioner of the Canadian Premier League, Mark Noonan. And Mark, you mentioned the growth of that, and obviously with the expansion of Vancouver, we have heard other clubs potentially getting expansion. Obviously, the Saskatchewan situation we've been waiting to hear. Do we have any updates on that situation in Saskatchewan, or are we still kind of just holding out hope at this point?
It's not just Saskatchewan. It's Kelowna. It's the entire province of Quebec. It's Kitchener-Waterloo. It's Windsor. There's other discussions within the greater Toronto area. We're having a lot of really, really good expansion discussions, and we'll expand when we have all the conditions to be successful, and that means a facility to play in, a great ownership group, municipality support, supporters groups, local sponsorship, and we're not putting any kind of timeline, and I'd be disappointed if we didn't have 12 teams kicking the ball by 2026. And that's kind of my goal. Is I think that's the right amount of expansion. When you think about dilution of a product from a timeline standpoint, and it gives us the time to make sure that we're getting those conditions right. And I should also mention Edmonton. That's a market we'd like to get back to, because that's a really good market if we have those conditions.
Edmonton is one that I was going to ask you about. Obviously, The dissolution of that club was a big deal at the end of last season. How important is it for the league to try to get a club back there, or at least in the Edmonton region?
Yeah, we'd love to be back there. As we said when we sadly had to disband that club, that the Edmonton wasn't the issue. It was facility. It was an owner that ran into to challenging times financially and his business. And it was a decision that we didn't take lightly, but it's going to allow us to come back in that market if we can work with a municipality on the facility issue. Come back in that market and do it right. And it's a market that we think can be a very, very successful market for the Canadian Premier League. We want to reignite the rivalry with the Cavalry there. And it fills in a good geographic gap for us in a very big country.
Absolutely. In conversation with the commissioner of the CPL, Mark Noonan. And Mark, the league in itself, in its infancy still, only in going into its fifth year, how have you seen the global recognition for the league kind of change over the past couple years and with the growth of Canadian soccer as a whole?
Yeah, we're starting to get realized, recognized. It helps when you have great partners like Atletico de Madrid. I was over there a couple of weeks ago meeting with their ownership and talking about how they can continue to support the league and perhaps bring some of their friends over from Europe to partner with some of our clubs. I was a little jealous because that's a club that's got a 120-year history. They got a little bit of a head start, but if you think about it, we're about to start our fifth season, two of which were in the shadow of a global pandemic, and we've already placed 5 guys have come through our league and played for the Canadian national team. We are selling players to more established leagues in Europe for decent transfer fees. So when you do those sort of things, and then you're part of the World Leagues Forum, which all the leagues get together and talk about best practices. When you have when you're starting as a country to really make noise on a national level with our national team, the world is starting to take notice, and that's exciting. And the most exciting part is that 4 or 5 years is, in the grand scheme of things, is absolutely nothing. I remember about 4 or 5 years into MLS, writing a press release that we ended up folding 2 teams, Miami and Tampa, going from 12 teams down to 10 teams, and 6 of those teams were owned by one guy, Phil Anschutz. 6 out of 10 teams in the league were owned by one person. And we would joke in the league office, do we work for Commissioner Garber or do we work for Phil Anschutz? Because, it was, and to his credit, he never, ever took it, abused that privilege. And because of him, the league now has 29 teams. And that was 20 short years ago.
Yeah, it seems like just yesterday for people who have followed the game. But yeah, you're right. 20 years ago, that's what was happening in the MLS, and now look where we're at. I wanted to also talk about that pathway that you mentioned, that the CPL has now graduated 5 players to the national program. And you guys have worked really, really closely with League One Canada across the country. How important is it, the growth of that pathway, adding more League Ones across the country, adding more clubs, as we already mentioned, to help grow Soccer Canada's pool of eligible players?
Yeah, and what people may not recognize, or they don't understand, is that the Canadian soccer business owns League One Canada, and we're working very closely with Dino Rossi, who's our chairman, to expand League One. He and his team were just up in the Maritimes and Atlantic. We're talking about having a League One up there. We're talking about League One Prairies. We're working very closely with PLSQ, looking very closely with League One BC, and obviously Ottawa. And in 2014, there were 9 League One teams. This year, we're going to have 161 teams. And wow. The nice thing about the League One is that it caters to the male and the female player. Last year, we created the first interprovincial championship for women, which was a great success. And providing that platform in that pyramid is so important. You guys may have noticed that I made a big hire, an important hire, and announced this week in bringing Costa into the league office. And what I love about him is that he's got experience in building clubs. Sigma is one of the great clubs in Canada, building clubs at the youth level, but also building clubs at the pro level. So between Costa and Dino Rossi, I got two guys on our team who really understand how that pyramid works, and you're going to see some really cool stuff coming out of that in the not too distant future.
Yeah, and we've been following it here closely at Footy First. Actually, we had Holly O'Neill, one of the graduates from League One Ontario, who is now over in Iceland, join us. So trust me, we've seen the growth, and it's well worth it.
The numbers are impressive. We've had 15 women go through the Premier, 1,500 women go through the Premier Division there, 150 of which have gone on to play professional soccer, and 2,000 men and 200. So about 10% of every player in League One is going on to play professionally, and it's no different than sales. Like the broader your pipeline is, the more players go through it, the better off you're gonna be.
Absolutely agree, 100%. In conversation with the CPL Commissioner Mark Noonan, and Mark, you mentioned the players there. I want to get into the Players Union, which was officially recognized by the league this year. Do we have any updates on that from what we've seen in the news, or how has those conversations kind of gone between the two sides?
Yeah, nothing new to add. I mean, in the off season, we voluntarily increased the salary cap as well as the minimum salary. We voluntarily recognized the players union, the PFA Can. The players are important in growing the game, and we're going to enter into our first collective bargaining agreement with them, and those negotiations will start in the near future, and that's part of the maturity and growing up of a league in a sport, and we look forward to partnering with our players to grow the sport here.
Absolutely. Couple more questions before I let you go here. I don't want to take too much of your time on this beautiful worries. Saturday.
We're getting stood up by Nico, though. I hope he's okay.
Apparently there was some connection issues at training ground, but he sent me a bunch of questions, so I've been sneaking them in. You've been now in your position for, as I said, like 6 to 7 months. In an ideal world, in your eyes, what is the growth path over the next year or two for the league?
The growth path is what we said earlier, is to expand the league, to grow infrastructure officer in Marnie Dicker, who previously was the head of infrastructure development for the province of Ontario, and got all the buildings built for the Pan Am games that were here. And so the maturity of the game comes with these cathedrals that you need to play and to celebrate your game, as well as to control scheduling and economics. One of the things that people may not know is that our final last year in Ottawa, we had to play on Sunday because the Canadian Football League had scheduling preference. We would have easily put another 5,000 people in that building if we could have played on Saturday. So we need to work really hard on scheduling, on facilities, on expansion, but never ever forgetting that the most important thing is how do we continue to develop the product on the field, increase the value of our playing assets for the league as well as for the players themselves, and put a great product out there for the supporters that are really starting to believe that this Canadian league has got a chance to do great things.
100% agree with you there. And you mentioned the development of the product, and obviously the product is the players on the field. As the league gets more mature, do you foresee potentially changing the Canadian rules of how many Canadian players must be on a roster, or the under 21 rules?
Yeah, those are things that are always going to be discussed. We can't be so rigid in our thinking that just because this is the way we do it today is we do it tomorrow. If we add 4 teams in the next few years, that's going to dilute the Canadian talent as well. So do you need to have as many Canadians on the roster? But those are the sort of things that we're going to be really thoughtful about as we go forward.
Okay, we mentioned it is the opening weekend. There are 4 matches this weekend. How many of them are you going to be able to attend, and how excited are you to get the product back on the field?
I'm going to be able to attend 2 of them. I'll be at the Tim Hortons for the Forge match versus their rival, Cavalry, and then tomorrow I'll be at York for their match against Valor. I will watch on One Soccer the early match day, Ottawa versus Halifax, and then tonight we'll watch the brand new derby, which doesn't have a name yet. We need the fans to figure out what they're going to call that derby between the brand new Vancouver FC and Pacific FC.
Yeah, you know what? We're going to put a poll out. I'll put some ideas out there. We'll get some feedback from the fans and try to get that back to you as soon as we can. Okay?
Yeah, it's got to. Yeah, it's got to be organic, right? Yeah,
it has to be.
The supporters really have got to decide what it's their derby. What it is that they want to call it. So. If anything you can do to help them organize would be great.
Absolutely. We will definitely put something out just to try to get some feedback and send it back your way. Mark, really do appreciate you taking the time today. Really excited to get the 5th season underway.
Yeah, Nick, thanks to you guys for the coverage. You do a great job. You follow the game and you care about it, and we really need people like you in the media to continue supporting the Canadian version of the beautiful game.
Oh, really appreciate those kind words. It means a lot to me as someone who grew up in the Canadian soccer system. Now on the other side, it means a lot. So thank you so much. We're going to take a break here, and on the other side, I'm going to tee up those 4 games that we mentioned, talk about some MLS action as well. You're listening to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Welcome back to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Nick McVicar holding it down solo ahead of the CPL opening week. And folks, I know some of you have been wondering why we haven't talked a lot of CPL in the previous few weeks, and I'll be honest with you, with MLS action going underway, Canadian soccer matches happening both in friendlies and competition, when there's actual action, it's a lot easier to talk about teams. So I will apologize, but don't think we don't love the CPL and don't follow it profusely. I am so excited about this season, and we're going to kick it off with 4 matches this weekend, not to mention another 5 matches. 5 matches in the Canadian Championship as well, including CPL teams. 3 MLS matches. This is just a great time to be around Canadian soccer, and I am very excited about this, just sheerly for the fact that it's happening. We're here. We are at the point where we get to watch as many Canadian matches as possible outside of adding League One in. Or League One started this week as well. I don't even know what I'm saying. League One Ontario kicked off on Tuesday. This is a great time to be a Canadian soccer fan because we're going to see as many Canadian talents as we possibly can and as many Canadian clubs playing as we possibly can. So to those of you who are wondering why we hadn't talked about CPL in a couple weeks, well, MLS action had taken place and we wanted to cover that as much as we could. Now with the CPL back, we're talking CPL. And I'm really excited about these 4 games. We got some great matches to kick off the season. And the kickoff one, Atletico, Halifax, first game of the year in Ottawa. This is a match of the team that won the regular season last year versus the team that has made probably the most changes out of any club. They brought in a new head coach. They brought in a lot of young talent. I'm interested to see how this Halifax team plays out. Now, if I'm looking ahead to this game, it's going to be a tough match. Ottawa is very strong. We talked about their center back depth. Even though they lost Drew Becky, he has become part of the club in a different way. But their depth is so strong. They have good talent up front. And with Nate Ingham in the back, that's just a tough team to break down. So I think this is going to be a tough match for Halifax, don't get me wrong. But this is an intriguing matchup to see the powerhouse that was Atletico last year against the completely changed Halifax this year. And in Game 2, we just talked about it with the commissioner. Forge, Cavs, one of, if not the best rivalries in the league. These two teams have been so competitive for so long. Two coaches who are still remaining from year one. The depth of these squads is incredible. You have the reigning champs in Forge going to, I don't know if they raise a banner technically, but do a celebration ahead of their opening match. Fans, get down to Tim Hortons Field early if you have tickets. There's a potential for you to get a replica CPL champion medal. Like, this is going to be such a fun match. And then you look to the night match, and it's the new rivalry. Pacific, Vancouver. How can you ask for anything more? This is an opportunity to see the brand new club in Vancouver, led by Afshin Gotbi, who has been very vocal about how he wants his squad. They recently named Callum Irving their first signing, their captain for their inaugural season. A great choice in my mind as well. This team is young. This team is going to be fast, and I think they're going to be defensively pretty sound, as we talked about with Afshin Gotbi when we interviewed him, when he got the job. That's something that he's held his hat on for so long, is being defensively sound at every step of the way. And now he's got this young squad. I'm excited to see that. And then obviously the last match of the week, York, Valor. York, a completely different type of team than they were last year. You heard Bobby mention it. You heard Noonan mention it. This is an opportunity for them to go from the team that had always talked about going young to now a veteran team, led by Nico, led by the back line of Tass and Jonathan Grant, who played on Forge last year. This is a team that midfield is completely new, and their attacking force is very, very strong with Ozazi and Mo Babuli. And then there's Valor, who consistently finish around the mid-table. They're a tough team to play against. They do not give up much. And now they're going to go out into York and try to beat them at home in their first match. It's a tough match. These are 4 great games that the CPL has scheduled, and I cannot be more excited for them. And I wish I could keep talking about how great this opportunity is, but we do have to take one more break, as on the other side, it is time for our predictions. And boy, do we have an interesting set of games this week, because there's so many of them. We have 11 games to predict, folks. So on the other side, I will do that. Nico did send me in his picks as well, so don't worry, you'll get his. But you're listening to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Welcome back to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Nick McVicar holding it down solo, but don't worry, it is time for our predictions. And boy, do we have a lot for you this week. Because taking the 2 games that York is playing, because obviously we cannot predict Nico's team, that would just be not fair. He'd pick York every game, and I'd get a couple free wins every now and then. We got 11 matches. 11 matches, because not only is there MLS action this week, all 3 Canadian teams in 3 separate games, not only is there CPL matches this week, because all of the CPL games start this weekend, 4 matches there, but we're only doing 3. There is also the Canadian Championship. The Voyageurs Cup starts this week. We're very excited about it. So we got to predict everything. 11 matches. I'm going to read them off really quick, and then I'll get Nico's predictions out to you. But the 11 matches in order, and we're doing the Atletico Halifax game as our match of the week, so that'll be our last one. The CPL opener is the match of the week. We have DC versus Montreal, Atlanta versus TFC, Vancouver hosting Austin. In Austin. Don't know why I said hosting. Cavalry Forge, Vancouver FC versus Pacific, Valor versus TSS Rovers in the Canadian Championship, Cavs versus Pacific in the Canadian Championship, Laval versus Forge in the Canadian Championship, Atletico Halifax Canadian Championship, Vaughan Montreal in the Canadian Championship, and Atletico Halifax in the CPL, as I mentioned, is our match of the week. So, without any further ado, here's Nico with his picks.
Footy First fans, welcome to CPL opening weekend. And here are my predictions. We got a lot of games, so I'm just going to run through them. Normally I just go off the top of my head, but I had to write them down because there's that many games. So, starting off in the MLS, DC versus Montreal. I'm going to take DC United to take the win there. Atlanta at Toronto. I reluctantly always have faith in Toronto FC, and they seem to let me down from time to time. But I'm going to go Toronto FC, win. Vancouver at Austin. Vancouver's in good form right now. In the league at least, and for that reason I'm going to pick them to take a win over Austin. We're going to skip over Halifax Atletico because that's our game of the week. Cavs at Forge, the rivalry. Forge looks strong. Sergio Camargo, I believe, isn't dressing for this game. For that reason I got Forge. Tight game though. Vancouver FC, their first game in CPL action versus Pacific, West Coast BC rivalries, the same owners. I wonder who they're cheering for. But I'm going to go Pacific in this game. Valor at TSS Rovers. Now we're looking at Can-Champ Cup later on in the week. I'm just going to go Valor to take that one. Cavs at Pacific in the Cup. Cavs are going to take that one. Cup competition, always important for those boys. Laval at Forge. Sorry, Laval, you probably have zero chance. And Atletico versus Halifax in the Cup. I have Atletico to go through, but there should be a decent home crowd for Halifax since they're playing here in Vaughan. And game of the week, Halifax versus Ottawa at CPL opening game. I got a 2-0 win for Atletico Ottawa. And I missed the game. Vaughan, Montreal in the Cup. It's going to be a tough game. Let's go with Montreal to get a win in that one. Those are my predictions. Good luck, everyone, and enjoy opening weekend for CPL.
So there you have it. Lots and lots of matches. And those are Nico's predictions. By the way, Nico went 1-4 last week, so his record is now sitting at 11-13. I had a good week. I went 3-2. 10-14 on the season, so I'm one game back of Nico. After all of that, I've done significantly better than I thought I was going to after the first few weeks. We're back almost at 500. I think this is going to be a big week for me. So let's get right into my picks. DC Montreal. I'm sorry, Montreal. They're not playing well. I wish I could say that they were, but they aren't, so I'm going DC in this match. The Atlanta TFC match. This is an interesting one. I know TFC has already beaten Atlanta, but I see this one ending up being a draw. TFC still struggling to hold on to leads, and if they don't get out to a lead, they're not playing great anyway, so I'm going to take the draw on this one. Vancouver, Austin, I'm sticking with Nico. I like the way Vancouver's been playing in this one, so I'm taking a Vancouver victory. Cavs, Forge, home opener for Forge, and for that reason, with the crowd behind them, with the whole celebration, I'm taking Forge in this one, but it's going to be a fun match, and I can't wait. Vancouver FC Pacific, the new rivalry, and I think it's going to be a draw. I know a lot of people are going to take Pacific just because they are a very strong squad. I do think they are a very strong squad. They've added to them. But defensively, I think this Vancouver FC side is going to be very good, and for that reason, I think it's going to be a 0-0 draw. Valor versus TSS Rovers in the Canadian Championship. Again, I don't see a way that TSS wins this game, but I could see a draw, but I'm taking Valor in this one. Cavs versus Pacific in the Canadian Championship as well. I'm going to stick with Nico. I like Cavs in this one as well. Forge, Laval. Laval got a very tough draw having to go in against the CPL champions. I'm taking Forge in this one. Just a tough matchup. I'm sorry, Laval. I hope that you have some success this year, but this is just not a game that I see them winning. Atletico Halifax in the Canadian Championship. I actually see this one as a draw. This could be a very tight match. As I said, I like what I saw from the growth of Halifax in the offseason, so I think they get a draw in this one. Vaughan, Montreal, the last Canadian Championship game this week. I'm taking Montreal in this one. I do think they're the better team, but I wouldn't be 100% shocked if they drew this one just because I do see them struggling to score in the CPL. I see them just having troubles going forward, so who knows? Maybe we see a surprise Vaughan goal. And then in the last game of the week, I got Ottawa winning their home opener against Halifax in the Canadian Championship 1-0. Going to be a fun match. I'm really excited for that. So there it is, folks. Those are our predictions for this week. Those will be posted later today as well, so you can follow along and play along with us. That'll do it for us here at Footy First. Make sure you enjoy the weekend of CPL action. Make sure you tune in next week. We always appreciate it. You can always listen back to the podcast, listen to our conversation with Bobby Smyrniotis from Forge, and, of course, the CPL Commissioner Mark Noonan. Until next week, we thank you for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.